Senator Mary Siri Kearney, you have 8 minutes.
Thank you very much. Minister, first of all, I want to congratulate you on the passage of this bill through the Dáil and here now. It's a very good piece of legislation, and absolutely we give our full support to it. I suppose the understanding, the public understanding of what sex offenders register is, I think that it can get misinterpreted a lot, and people imagine that this should be publicly available without understanding that there is a rehabilitative element to it, while also ensuring that Gardaí have the information on who is living in particular areas, where they are and how to monitor it. Because scholarly articles would look at recidivism rates, and to be fair, sexual offences are not the highest in recidivism rates. It's in drugs offences and other areas where there is. But you would have different scholarly articles that I've touched into. After 3 years, you'll have 5% of sexual offenders. After 15 years, 24% of sexual offenders will have re-offended. Now that means, let's put the corollary of that in place as well, that means after 3 years, 95% haven't re-offended. And after 15 years, 76% haven't re-offended. So just to put a balance on it. But it is important that we have a register, and that the Gardaí have, I think one of the most significant parts of this is that the Gardaí have the discretion now to inform where it is needed to inform. I think we have seen cases where unfortunately that wasn't the case, and to hear afterwards that someone had a particular history of offences of a particular nature it's too late after a crime has been perpetuated, particularly of the seriousness that we've seen in recent years. As regards you absolutely cannot work with children. That part I find a little bit peculiar, to be honest, as an element of this bill, and almost a duplication. So I suppose I would ask for where this enhances under the National Vetting Bureau Children and Vulnerable Persons Act of 2012. It's very clearly stated in that act that that there must be vetting carried out for persons who before they can work with children and vulnerable adults, which should always throw up to an employer, or in the context of a sports group or voluntary group or youth work or anything like that, where someone has offences. So while and maybe I'm answering my own question actually as I talk it out, this is creating the prohibition, whereas that is creating the notification, and I do get that. I suppose where the NVB Act in operation obliges employers to have a response in policy, which is quite a challenging one. So to have a varying response of when there's a disclosure that comes through of its sexual offences, now we have a very clear-cut statutory. If you have a sexual offence, there is no working with. But for other areas, they have to have a response so as not to fall foul of the Employment Equality Act. So in that regard, I would appreciate clarification that actually what I've worked out on my feet is correct. I pored over this on Sunday and thought, where are we? It is already on notice. But that is a really important piece. As regards, I would echo my colleague's comments regarding a pattern at times in sentencing, while absolutely adhering to the separation of powers. I'm not sure in the public domain, given some high-profile cases and when they're reported in the media, that there is confidence that sufficient respect is given for the severity of injury that arises out of sexual offences. And that on occasion it is almost trivialised or appears to be trivialised in the sentencing that's given. So I do think, I know my colleague Ellen O'Malley Dunlop has, in her role informally with the National Women's Council and also with the Ripe Crisis Centre, she's been involved in training of the judiciary and of members, practitioners in law, including barristers and solicitors, in cross-examination in these cases, in looking at the degree of trauma involved in these cases. But I certainly, when it comes to sentencing, having a sensitivity to if somebody is debilitated to such an extent that they're then in a wheelchair, that's obvious to the court. A victim standing there appearing to look whole does not, it almost is contradictory to the internal trauma that causes, and to the years perhaps of disruption of life that has occurred as a consequence. I think that, I suppose, it's not in the context of this bill, but there's something about the sex offenders register that has a stigma attached to it that in and of itself serves as a type of deterrent. And we recently had, and I know your own department, along with Minister Simon Harris, has published the Heads of Bill for the Criminal Justice Engagement of Children in Criminal Activity Bill. With the idea of where children are coerced and groomed for criminal offences, for activity. And there are particular communities where children as young as 6, and in response to the report, What We Heard 2022 brought out by the Policing Authority, the children as young as 6 are being put along the lines of being engaged as drug mules and all the rest. So I suppose, respectfully, I would suggest that we almost need to have a register that is sexual offenders and groomers to elevate the grooming of children for any purpose. Both sexual offences, which in and of itself is horrific, but also a child that is groomed as a drug mule, then perhaps loses a package. So let's bring this on. Perhaps loses a package, then finds themselves in debt. And there is that cycle of drug debt, and drug debt leading to all sorts of then obligations to behave in particular ways, and then being sexually exploited. It isn't a very far reach. So there is something where we need to have a higher lifelong stigma attached to a consequence of grooming a child. And I would respectfully, in the context of that other bill, I would put forward that something like that needs to be put in place. And lastly, I think because of the misunderstanding of the sex offenders register, we need an information campaign at the end of this as to how good this piece of legislation is. So thank you.
Thank you, Senator.